There are names in myth that echo like thunder across the centuries: Zeus, Athena, Ares. But in the age of digital legend, another name rose from nothing and carved itself into the pantheon of modern myth: Kratos. He was never sung by ancient poets or carved into marble in forgotten temples. His story did not begin as a scroll in a scholar's hand, but as a whisper in the code of a new kind of epic. Yet the tale that grew around him feels as old as tragedy itself. A mortal who challenged the gods, a warrior forged in blood, a man who dragged his sins behind him like chains. In a world already crowded with legends, Kratos forced the cosmos to make room for one more. Long before he was called the Ghost of Sparta, he was simply a child of a harsh city-state built for war. Sparta was a furnace that burned away weakness. Boys were taken from their homes, their childhoods hammered into discipline and obedience. Kratos grew up in that brutal order, learning that mercy was a weakness and fear was a tool to be used against others, never surrendered to. He was not alone. By his side stood his younger brother Deimos. Together, they trained, bled, and dreamed under the harsh Spartan sun. But even in that sea of hardened youths, something about them caught the attention of forces beyond mortal sight. An oracle spoke of a marked warrior who would bring about the destruction of Olympus. The gods, trembling at a shadowed future, acted not with wisdom, but with fear. Ares, god of war, descended upon Sparta like a storm. In a moment of divine violence, he seized Deimos, tearing him away from Kratos before his brother's eyes. The boy clawed and screamed, but against a god his strength was nothing. Deimos vanished into the clutches of Olympus, and Kratos was left with empty hands and a soul cracked down the middle. That wound never healed. In memory of his stolen brother, Kratos marked his own skin with the same red tattoo Deimos had worn. It was both a tribute and a promise, never to forget, never to forgive. As he grew into adulthood, that promise hardened into something sharper than steel. Kratos rose swiftly through Spartan ranks, his brutality and tactical genius turning battlefields into monuments to his ambition. His name became a war cry under his command. Spartan soldiers marched further, struck harder, and bent more cities to their will. He took a wife and had a daughter, brief glimpses of warmth in a life otherwise ruled by blades and orders. But even in those quiet moments, something restless boiled beneath his calm exterior. Glory called to him louder than peace ever could. That hunger led him to the battle that changed everything. Far from home, Kratos and his army faced a barbarian horde that refused to break. The battlefield became a graveyard in the making. His men fell one after another until Kratos himself was forced to his knees. Surrounded, beaten, moments from death, he stared up at an uncaring sky and made a choice that would define his fate. He called out, not to his king, not to his men, but to a god. He begged Ares for power, not mercy, not rescue. Power, enough to crush his enemies and secure his legacy. Ares listened. The god of war descended, towering and terrible, and accepted the bargain. Chains snapped around Kratos' wrists, and the blades of chaos fused to his flesh, searing his skin and binding his soul. The transformation was complete. The mortal became a weapon. With his newfound strength, Kratos tore through the barbarians like a living storm. Limbs were severed, shields shattered, and the ground drank more blood than it could hold. The tide of the battle reversed in moments. Sparta's enemies were annihilated. Kratos had his victory, but the price had only just begun to be paid. From that day, he no longer served Sparta alone. He served Ares, the very god who had stolen his brother. The irony was cruel, but Kratos was too intoxicated by power and revenge to see it clearly. Under Ares' command, he razed villages, toppled cities, and slaughtered without question. The Spartan discipline he once used as a shield became a blade. He turned on the world. Yet even monsters cast a shadow of the person they once were. Somewhere beneath the rage, the husband and father still lived. He kept his family away from the horrors he unleashed, clinging to them as the last vestige of humanity left in him. Ares saw this and judged it a weakness. So, the god of war set the stage for his champion's final descent. Kratos led an assault on a small village, flames rising as doors splintered and screams shattered the night. He fought his way to a temple, blind to anything but the order he'd been given: leave nothing standing. The oracle of the village tried to warn him, to stop him, but her words were drowned out by the roar of battle and the thrill of destruction. Inside the temple, in that dimly lit sanctum, Kratos slaughtered the figures that rushed toward him, blades carving through the darkness. When the rage faded and his vision cleared, he saw the truth. At his feet lay his wife and child. The god he served had tricked him. Ares had guided Kratos' hand to destroy the very people he loved, believing that by severing all earthly ties, he would forge a champion bound only to war. Instead, he created something far more dangerous: a man with nothing left to lose. The oracle cursed Kratos on the spot. The ashes of his wife and daughter clung to his skin, seeping into his flesh, turning him pale and ghostly. Their memory became his burden, their deaths his armor. From that day on, the world would know him as the Ghost of Sparta. Haunted by nightmares, Kratos broke with Ares. He refused to be the god's weapon any longer, but his freedom did not bring peace. Every night, he relived the moment in the temple: the smell of burning wood, the weight of the blades, the silence after the screams. He sought redemption, but found only distant promises and cruel tasks. The gods of Olympus, ever pragmatic, saw use in a broken man desperate for absolution. They offered him a path, a series of impossible labors, each more dangerous than the last, in exchange for the faint hope that his torment might one day end. For 10 years, Kratos bled for the gods. He battled monsters born from nightmares, traversed seas cursed by Poseidon, and descended into caverns where light itself seemed afraid to follow. And still, the nightmares persisted. Then came the final task. Athena, goddess of wisdom, summoned him with an offer: kill Ares, and the gods would forgive his sins. Athens burned as Ares laid siege to the city, using the mortal realm as his battleground. The irony was terrible. Kratos, once the champion of war, now sent to slay the god he had served. To defeat a god, he needed more than rage. He needed power that even Ares feared. He needed Pandora's box. The journey to the box became a trial of his will. He climbed the spine of the temple of Pandora, built upon the massive chained body of the titan Kronos, wandering across sands where time itself seemed to sleep. He faced traps designed to break mind and body, fought beasts that should not exist, and walked through halls lined with the bones of those who had tried before him and failed. But Kratos did not turn back. Every obstacle was just another thing to tear down. Every trial was another chance to move one step closer to the god he had sworn to destroy. At last, he claimed Pandora's box. Its power flowed through him, amplifying everything he already was: rage, strength, defiance. Each rose to something beyond mortal comprehension. With that stolen might, he confronted Ares in a cataclysmic battle that shook the land and stained the heavens. Steel met divine fury. Old master against new monster. In the end, Kratos did the unthinkable. He killed the god of war. Olympus trembled. A mortal had slain a god, shattering a line no one had ever dared cross. For his service, the gods rewarded him with a throne. Kratos was lifted up, draped in divinity, and crowned as the new god of war. But elevation did not erase what he had done, or what had been done to him. The seat on Olympus did not quiet his nightmares. He sat among the gods, but he was not at peace. The wars he now fueled were crueler, more relentless, driven by his need to drown the echoes of his past in the roar of conquest. Kratos, god of war, became a terror to the world. The gods watched him with growing unease. Zeus, king of Olympus, saw in Kratos something he recognized: a power too dangerous to leave unchecked. Fearful of the fate the oracle had foretold, he struck first. On the battlefield, Zeus appeared not as a distant ruler, but as executioner. He offered Kratos one chance to surrender his power to submit. Defiance had always been the Spartan's answer. Zeus drove the blade of Olympus through his chest, draining his godhood in a flash of light and casting him down into the yawning darkness of the underworld. For most, that would have been the end. For Kratos, it was another beginning. Refusing to accept oblivion, he clawed his way back from Hades itself. Helped by Gaia, the Titan who whispered promises of vengeance, he began a new war. This time, not between cities or armies, but between ages, Titan against Olympian, old gods against new, and at the center of it all, a single Spartan who had turned his hatred into a weapon capable of shaking the world. Kratos led the Titans up the slopes of Mount Olympus, clinging to Gaia's colossal form. As the mountains split and thunder screamed overhead, he no longer fought for redemption. He fought for retribution, for the right to break the order that had used him, cursed him, and thrown him away when his purpose had been served. As his war against Zeus raged on, more truths surfaced, like corpses rising from a drowned city. Kratos learned of his own bloodline. He was not just a mortal chosen by the gods, he was the son of Zeus himself. The king of Olympus had tried to destroy his own child, just as he had overthrown his father, Kronos. The cycle of fear and betrayal was older than either of them, written into the bones of the cosmos. Every step Kratos took drew him deeper into the shattered heart of his world. He confronted long-buried memories, encountered Pandora, a young girl whose very existence was bound to the power of the box, and faced the crushing weight of what his vengeance had cost. The gods fell one by one. Poseidon, Hades, Helios, Hermes, Hera. Each death tore another piece from the fabric of reality. As the Olympians died, the world suffered. Seas rose, storms raged, plagues spread, and the sun dimmed. Gods were not just rulers. They were embodiments of balance. With each divine bloodshed, nature itself came undone. Kratos wanted justice, but what he left behind was ruin. The final confrontation with Zeus was as much internal as it was external. In the ruins of Olympus, surrounded by the ghostly echoes of the past, father and son clashed in a battle that transcended flesh, rage against fear, defiance against control, the abused son against the devouring father. In the end, Kratos did what he had always done. He refused to bow. He beat Zeus into silence and ended the rule of the king of the gods with his own two hands. The war was over. The gods lay dead. Olympus stood broken, but victory felt hollow. Among the shattered stones and the bodies of those he had slain, Kratos confronted a final revelation. Pandora's box had not unleashed some monstrous evil on the world when it was opened long ago. It had released hope that power had not belonged to gods or monsters, but to the mortals, who continued to live, suffer, and endure in the shadow of divine cruelty. For all his rage, Kratos now stood at a crossroads. He could cling to vengeance until the end, or choose to do something the gods had never understood. He could let go. With the world collapsing, with humanity left to face the consequences of his war, Kratos took the blade of Olympus and turned it upon himself. In one final act, he plunged the weapon into his own body and released the last of the power that had driven his life into chaos. Hope flowed out like a river of light, spreading across a broken world that desperately needed something to hold on to. He fell. The camera of legend pulls back, past the rubble of Olympus, past the swirling clouds, past the shattered constellations of an age that has ended. The gods are gone. The pantheon is silent, but the world, scarred and trembling, still stands. Where Kratos' body had lain, there is only blood and a trail leading away from the blade. No corpse, no quiet, unquestioned ending, just a suggestion, a whisper, that his story did not end where the gods did. In the ruined heavens above Greece, A new kind of myth hangs in the air, one not written by priests or kings, but by every soul that ever looked up at power and dared to say no. Kratos began as a child of Sparta, became a servant of war, a murderer of family, a breaker of chains, and finally, a godslayer who chose to give away what he had fought to claim. His legend is as much a warning as it is an anthem. It speaks of what happens when power forgets compassion, when gods treat mortals as pawns, when vengeance reaches so far that it tears the world apart. But it also speaks of something quieter and more enduring, a stubborn ember of hope that even the cruelest fate, the darkest past, and the heaviest guilt can be challenged. On the battlefields of memory, in the broken temples of lost Olympus, the story of Kratos remains, not as a clean, heroic tale, but as an epic carved with scars and stained with regret, a mortal who killed gods, a monster who tried, at the very end, to do one thing that did not serve his rage. Somewhere beyond the Greek horizon, beyond the gods he destroyed and the world he remade, his journey continues in ways the old myths never predicted. But in that first era, in the age of Olympus, one fact stands unchallenged. Kratos did what no one else dared. He looked at the throne of heaven, saw the injustice carved into its stone, and tore it down with his bare hands, leaving behind a world forever changed and a legend that refuses to fade.